10 months and 9 days in post, and Jeremy Corbyn is facing the first challenge to his leadership of the Labour Party. Having endured an avalanche of high and low-profile resignations and a vote of no confidence by over 70% of his fellow MPs, the signs are that Mr Corbyn continues to enjoy unprecedented levels of support among the party membership. Today, he set about the tricky business of trying to unite the party and see off the threat of his challenger Owen Smith, while also setting out his vision for a Corbyn premiership. In a moment, Evan interviews the Labour leader. But first, did today's launch herald the breaking of a brave new dawn, or was it all a bit business as usual? The Britain that Jeremy Corbyn was born into was a very different place from the Britain of today. Against a backdrop of epic conflict, Corbyn describes the injustices of a post-war society, namely the 5 giant evils identified by William Beveridge, the godfather of the welfare state, as want, squalor, idleness, yes, idleness, disease and ignorance.
We're not going back.
You're not going back at all?
By the time Corbyn had grown up, he says he was championing the cause of wage inequality, today making special reference to the Ford sewing machinist strikes in Dagenham in 1968 and 1984.
Very strong.
But today, he says, the injustices blighting the country are different, and he's distilled them down into 5 new evils: inequality, neglect, insecurity, prejudice and discrimination. One problem is that it's not entirely clear how Mr Corbyn plans to rid our islands of such plagues. In his speech today, for example, he talked of companies publishing equality pay audits, but otherwise there was little policy flesh on the principal bone.
There will still be grotesque levels.
He also had a message for MPs in his party about unity after the contest.
It's the job, it's the duty, it's the responsibility of every Labour MP to get behind the party at that point.
The problem is, it seems it's more do as I say than do what I do. Newsnight has delved into the archives and found this. It's Corbyn, then not even an MP, reacting to Tony Benn's failed bid to become deputy leader back in 1981. Corbyn blamed some left-leaning Labour MPs who abstained in the vote for Benn's loss.
But above all, I think we should also be considering the actions and attitudes of a number of left Labour MPs in Parliament. Because I believe, quite bluntly, the Tribune group in Parliament and those Tribune MPs that sought to abstain in the second ballot in reality voted for Healy. I think they must expect some discomfort from the rank and file in their own constituencies in the coming months.
But that was then, and this is now. And as he said today, the times have changed. Well, as luck would have it, Evan caught up with Mr Corbyn after his campaign launch this morning.
Can we talk about Brexit? On the morning after the referendum, you did go on TV and you basically said we need to invoke Article 50 now. Is that still your view that we should?
I may not have put that as well as I should have done. My view was and is that at some point Article 50 is going to be invoked, obviously.
But we don't need to rush. And it was just bad. It had been a long night, and you expressed it sort of badly.
The view I was putting was that Article 50 will be invoked at some point. I did not mean it should be invoked on Friday morning and we should rush over to Brussels and start negotiating things away, because clearly the negotiations are going to be very long and very complicated, because 40-odd years of EU membership means that almost every piece of legislation brings in a EU regulation somewhere.
I think that's a very important clarification. Another one that will be important is, are you open to the idea of a second referendum when we've got some way down the line, had a chance to think about it more, or are you basically a Brexit means Brexit and there's no going back?
I think you have to respect the result of the referendum, whether you welcome it or not, and respect the result, which was, unfortunately, a vote to leave. The bottom line's got to be access to European markets for industries that are based in Britain, clearly massive effect on, for example, Sunderland on this. It also has to be protection of the workers' rights that have been improved through EU regulation from often a union campaigning base 4 weeks holiday, etc., and also a very big raft of regulations on consumer protection, environmental protection, all those issues.
You've given an interesting statement of your objectives, if you were Prime Minister, of what the objectives would be, but you've missed one out. The one that something like 80% of working class people have a view on, which is immigration. And many see this negotiation as a choice between more access or less immigration. Now, where are you on the immigration debate?
I have made the point all along that the single market does include within it free movement of labour, and if you go away from that, you're not in the single market.
But
Germany's
Germany's
made that very clear. So the point I was making throughout the referendum campaign is that the Posting of Workers Directive would prevent the undercutting in Britain, would prevent that grotesque level of exploitation. That in turn would actually have a reduction effect.
Right, but basically, do you want to negotiate, if you were Prime Minister, there was an election tomorrow, would you negotiate with the EU some control on the uncontrolled free movement that exists at the moment?
I would want to see a movement of labour which recognises the need to have similarity of conditions across Europe. Because if we say we're going to start restricting, then it works both ways. It will also restrict British people going to live and work in Europe. I think that is going to be impossible within a single market. But also, I just urge people to think for a moment about I've talked about the British workers in Europe, but also the European workers in Britain that run our health service. They're quite important, 50,000.
No one is
you and I
resigning
depend on them for good health, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. No, but I'm taking it that you are someone who would say you want quite a bit of access, and there are other ways of dealing with the immigration.
Let's look at the other ways of dealing with it first, rather than rushing to barriers.
That's helpful. Could we deal with some of the criticisms that your colleagues have had of you? And they say it's not policy. They say a lot of it's about, well, competence and charisma, I suppose. Thangham Debonair, one of your MPs, now she wrote an account of how in January, when she was receiving cancer treatment, she was appointed as a shadow arts minister by you, she says, without being told. And then she says she was sacked the next day without being told. So someone else having told her she was in the shadow, she was a shadow minister, not in the cabinet, she was working on it and then discovered she had been sacked. Now, I just wonder whether that story, as she described it, is how you understand it, whether the facts there are correct.
It's not as I understand it. It was, I admit, not well handled. I was aware that she was receiving very serious cancer treatment, and I didn't want to disturb her treatment. Unfortunately, my wish to appoint her as one of our arts spokespersons was informed to her when it shouldn't have been, because I wanted to leave it until her treatment was over. And it was. She wasn't sacked. It was merely a question that she would start the job later on. And when she returned after her treatment, I had a very long conversation with her, and of course I apologised to her for that.
Owen Smith. Would you serve under Owen Smith? Would you respect his leadership if he won?
Owen Smith has offered me, unopposed to election, to a job that doesn't exist if
President
I resign.
of the party.
Well, there's no such job.
Would you not be president
no,
if he won?
I don't want to be president of the party. I'm not even sure we should have a president of the party. What's a president for? Sounds to me a bit like a director of football. So no, and it's a very strange thing to offer, because he offered that after he had decided to resign from the shadow cabinet earlier on, having told me he was happy to serve in the shadow cabinet. But that's up to him. It's fine. He's got every opportunity to do that and every right to do that if he wants to. But the creation of a position of president of the party would actually require a rule change, a constitutional change. It's not in his gift to offer unopposed election to anything unless he has some control over the whole electorate that I haven't been told about. It's kind of him anyway.
Is he a Blairite, do you think? Would you apply that label to him?
I don't go around calling people Blairites, actually, because Tony Blair stopped being Prime Minister in 2007. It's quite a long time ago.
But if you're a rebel in your party, here's a question for you. If Labour is a coalition.
How do you define rebel,
well,
by
no,
the
so
way?
people who are against your leadership.
Oh, okay.
If you're somebody who has a different view of what we need to do to respond to the problems you're talking about, what should you do? Should you be listening to the members in your local party, or should you be thinking through these issues yourself and making decisions based on your conscience? What should they be doing?
I can't tell people how to vote. I don't want to tell people how to
No,
vote.
but it's legitimate for them to take a different view and to oppose you and to say, this is a debate we're having and we're going to use every constitutional
Well, it's pretty
means we
obvious
can."
that's happening. That's why we're having the
And
election.
you welcome it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think some of your critics would say they want to have that debate, they want to talk about that, but you're otherworldly. In the last 6 weeks, the most important 6 weeks any of us can remember in British political history in our lifetime, in the last, you've been to 2 Cuba solidarity meetings.
I was there for 20 minutes and then I went back to my office and continued my work. I thought it was only respectful because a lot of us had pushed the British government to support their release, and in turn that actually helped to bring about the rapprochement between Cuba and the United States.
Well, I was thinking of the RMT Cuba Solidarity Garden Party, actually, where you're pictured next to the Cuban ambassador. Did you think to say to her, you must tell your Castro, the Castro brothers, that they've been in power for 57 years now and they haven't thought it necessary to hold an election to validate their power over the Cuban people?
I've focused on lots of issues, particularly to do with human rights in every country all over the world, and I continue to do so.
Including in Cuba?
Every country in the world, and that obviously includes them.
The backbenchers who are against you think there's this slightly otherworldliness, that you have to choose between the people of Burnley, who are not worried about the the situation of the US policy to Cuba, and the North London intellectuals who maybe do have that worry. And I just wonder where you feel your heart lies.
There are people in Burnley concerned about human rights around the world just as there are in North London. They might be different physical locations, but people often think the same and do communicate with each other.
Now look, just if you win, Tom Watson, the deputy leader, has said it may be difficult to get a shadow cabinet together. Can you just tell us how it is going to work when 80% of your MPs don't have confidence in you, but you're there? I mean, just how is it going to work?
Listen, if we win this election, and I hope we do, it will be an expression of a lot of people of the general economic social direction they want this party to go. And as it's now the biggest membership it's ever been, more people have registered to vote in this election than the entire membership of the Tory party in 48 hours. That says something about atmosphere in the whole country. I will appoint a shadow cabinet which will be as broad as I can, as I've done before, and I will reach out to those people as I've done before.
Because and you'll accept back the rebels if they want to come back in.
Well, listen, let's have charity towards people, not malice. I don't do malice.
Do you ever not just feel like putting the duvet over your head in the morning? So
Never. No, listen.
Come on, you must have thought,
I started
should I resign?
I started. You're sounding like somebody on the psychiatrist on the couch now. No. Do I sleep well? Yes. Do I do other things? Yes. Do I read widely? Yes. Do I think about things a great deal? Yes. Do I enjoy it? Absolutely. Look at me here. I'm very happy.
You could be
a lovely day.
You could be the leader of the Labour Party who oversees the final split of the party.
How about I could be the leader of the Labour Party that turns us into a force to change economic justice, opportunities and hope in our society.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much.
Thank you.